Hi, Rob Snow at Rob Art again, and this is part 2 of that painting I was telling you about in part 1, which was the parody illustration of George Washington crossing the Delaware River. Unbelievably, it's taken me 2 years to do this, but compressed in time, it's basically been about 30 days. This is part 2, like I said. It's all the foreground elements, all the different people in the boats. If you remember, the first part was me doing the background, waiting for the client to get back to me, and he eventually cancelled the project, and I thought I might as well finish it anyway. So this is the end result, and it's basically part 2 and to the conclusion. Hope you enjoy. Okay, like the previous video, I'm going to go through the time-lapse with you and do a narration over what was happening during the process. Like I said before, this was actually started 2 years ago, and this is actually the culmination of the 2 years. I've actually gone through 2 iterations of Photoshop in this time, but basically I did the background first because the client was deciding what to do with these characters that I'm actually painting while you're looking, and after I'd completed the background end of part 1, he basically cancelled the project, and I didn't want to waste the time I did on the background because I thought I did a quite good job. I decided to complete the project and ended up doing the foreground elements. So this is where we are now. You notice I basically started the front guy with some blocking in, and then I decided to go from the front to the, left to the right, which is the front of the boat to the back of the boat. I've been doing it kind of abnormally because usually you'd block all the characters in first in the base colours and then start doing the details, but because he's in the background, the black guy, I just wanted to fill him in just so I could get the actual detailing and testing my skills about whether I could actually duplicate the original to the standard that I would like to have it done. I did quite a good job on this, so after I finished this part of the rendering, I probably started doing all the blocking in, as you see here, like on all the other characters. So everything is just the base colours, and then once I've done the base colours, I would then focus on each of the characters. I didn't do every single character in this process. I did it as I went from left to right. So as I said to you in part 1 as well, there was not that much effort in the actual fact of originating any kind of artwork. It's actually just trying to replicate the original painting as close as possible, and you won't see any examples of this at the moment because what happened is I have a dual screen setup, so the actual original was a reference picture on the second screen, and I'm basically looking up and down and sampling the actual colours off the original. And if you actually look at the layers panel, you'll see it flicking backwards and forwards between when I'm sampling off the sample reference file and going back to this original one. As you see here though, I'm actually blocking quite a lot of the main characters just so I can get a threshold, and now I've gone back to doing the original first character. I quite like the actual process of doing the faces because the faces give you the character to the painting, and if you do them wrong, everything else looks just terrible. I don't know if you remember those restorations of the famous chapels in Spain. If you get it wrong, it just looks like a mess, so you got to concentrate very well on the actual expressions on the face and the lighting and shading. So I got that right, so I moved on, and another complicated part was the hair. Like you have to get that completely correct, else it looks a mess as well. But the rest of it was quite smooth sailing. It's just a simple case of time consumption. The amount of detail on the original one, which I wanted to replicate as well, meant that every process had to have thousands of brushstrokes on it just to get the look and feel of how the clothes were, how the shading was, how the fur was. You notice, for instance, on this fur, there's like little circles of light grey over the dark grey and all this kind of stuff, and you have to kind of do all this to make it look like the original. you can't just block the colour in and hope people will accept it's a rough estimation of the original. I wanted to give it as close as possible to the reality of the original painting, so I spent my time doing it, and as I said, the total time for the whole painting was 27 days if you compressed all the days into an hours into one. It was over 2 years. Like I said, I did the first background section within less than a month, because obviously it was waiting for the client, and I was trying to cut down the time consumption. As soon as I finished the background, I put it to one side because I had other projects to do and everything. I had to make money, and I slowly when I found time, did extra parts. Like I did this first character in one day, and then maybe a week had gone by, and I start doing the other guy in front of him, and so forth. So it was, you'll notice there, I just hadn't finished the first guy, and I just flipped to doing some more blocking. And that's because I get kind of a little bit tired of the amount of detail, and I mentioned this in the first video, that it kind of is physically demanding. You won't believe how demanding it is physically to try and paint like this for 8 hours solid in one day. So what you do is you try to break up your effort into different sections of the painting in order to do some simple bits, go back to the hard bits, to find some blocking to do like I've done there, etc, etc. So there you go, I've gone back to the main guy because I've had a break. And so there's not much more to do on this guy. As I said, this furry effect is quite complicated, so I spent some time on that, and it's just doing the touching up now. And as you see on the right side on the panel, you'll see that the amount of layers are starting to build up. In the end, there was 137 layers used to do the whole painting. I'm sure I could have done more, but the thing is, I tend to want to have certain things blending together, because the edging is important to get us right, because you don't want a solid edge, even though I use a certain technique which is basically masking the transparent pixels in the layer palette, and by that means I can actually then not go over the edges, but it also then can give a solid edge. This is the final part of the first character. Quite complicated actually, doing leather and metal are quite hard, because you've got to think about giving the shiny effect as well. As I said, even though I'm copying a painting, I just want to give a kind of a feeling that I'm actually doing this painting myself. So I try to give it a feeling that I'm actually doing an original painting, and I'm actually developing the artwork as I go. Another face, trying to get it as good as possible. As I said, so far to this point I've actually done quite well. Some of the characters you'll notice I go through a lot quicker than others, and it's not necessarily because I'm tired of doing them, or it's because I'm speeding up. It's just simply because the main colours that they have, for instance his coat is just green, so the blocking of the actual shadowing becomes a lot easier because it's just one colour over. See, most of his body mass is just that one green image, so it makes life a lot easier in that respect. Okay, so what I've done is I've basically gone through the process of actually doing his detailing, And I'll let you watch it for a little bit because there's not much difference in the actual characters, and I'll come back when there's something different to actually show. Again, here I'm blocking in all the main characters at the back of the boat because I was a bit tired. So, and I went back to finishing off the third character in the boat at the front. You'll notice actually there's some pencil work over the top, which I used obviously as a guide traced over the original. And you'll notice it's got some additional elements which are not in the original, which it was the whole point of the commission, which is like iPhones and leads for earpods and things like that. So this would be done later at the end, but it's just for referencing for where things are. And now you'll see that I'm doing another one of the speakers, again an additional element that's not in the original, and it was based on the idea that the commissioning client is actually from a radio station. He wanted to give this idea that there's this kind of broadcast for I don't know whether it was for civil rights or something like that, but he wanted all the different people on the boat to be different ethnic characters and with different first responder uniforms on, not the original uniforms. And this is why I didn't do them straight off, because I would have had to redesign the actual original characters into first responder characters, and luckily I didn't have to do that, so I kept them as the original ones. This was quite an easy character to do because it's mainly black. Which is quite good, and as I said, some days when I was doing it, the whole thing passed through very quickly, like this one did, and you felt like you're actually getting somewhere because you're getting further down the boat, and then I had to think of having a pause because I had lots of work on, and the next part of the thing I didn't probably do for another 2 or 3 months after this. And it kind of digs in the back of your mind, and you end up basically saying to yourself, well, I want to get it finished. So you then open it up another day and do another section, maybe for 4 or 5 hours. And I think the challenge was, the longer you go down the actual route of painting each figure and the further you go down the boat, the more optimistic you get, because it doesn't seem like such a massive amount of white space to actually fill in then, which would have been a different aspect if I'd had blocked everything in at the start. But just to tell you some of the techniques, because you'll see I'm using an actual plugin for Photoshop called Colorus, and I'd really recommend it if you want to. You can use this as well as doing the sampling from the original photographs to do sampling for colours, and you can do it in different methods. But I also use a brush collective plugin called Brush Box, which is highly recommended as well. But saying that, I tend to use the main brush, which is a hairbrush I found from a friend on Behance, and he gave me the sample, and I've used it ever since, because basically what I'd like to do, which is something I'd like to do outside of digital artists, to do actual real painting, oil painting. And this brush in Photoshop actually gives the impression, because it's actually a hairbrush. There we go, you can see the actual hairbrush panel now. And it's my same brush I always use, because it looks like the effect you would get if you were actually brushing with quite a nice sable brush onto art paper or canvas or something, because it gives you those strokes. And because I do my artwork at very high resolution, this one's 15,000 pixels wide, then it doesn't give you a very solid look of hair. It gives you kind of a micro aspect. If you see where the lines are actually being splashed in there, you can see the actual brush effect, but if you were painting with a paintbrush on paper or canvas, you would get the same effect. And I really like that, so I stick with it. The only other brush I used on this one project was a blending brush for doing the sky, and it kind of, there were certain sections which didn't need that kind of hard kind of brushy look to them, so I wanted to make it softer. and so I used this kind of blending brush, which was for skin, to give softer skin. It was actually done by the guy who does Paintable, and I've used that. So basically 2 brushes, and you'll see that the layers are going up, and I've done each character as a separate group layer, obviously to make life easier, because I can mask it or whatever, or just keep it organised. And this is getting to the point where I actually realised, and you'll see that the picture pops in, when I started doing the actual flag. The detailing on the flag was so extreme, that's probably the best way of putting it, that I actually had to bring the samples of the picture in, so I could actually have it next to the piece I was painting, because it was just so difficult to keep looking up at the second screen to see how to paint it, and I'll wait until it gets to that point to explain a bit more. The way you use a brush doing the different textures, even though it's the same brush, can make the difference between it looking kind of the way you want it to. Like this is supposed to be wool as a scarf, and what you do is you basically, as you're painting along, you just do a little kind of wobble on the lines, and it actually literally just gives you that effect of being broken up. And it's all to do with the pressure that you put onto the brush, because when you're using a Wacom tablet, it has very sensitive pen pressure options, and you can get some quite nice effects. But also, I don't know whether you can see, up in the top panel, I tend to change the opacity and the flow off 100%, and this is basically to allow the blending of certain colours into each other, so that also affects the way that the painting works. One issue with that is when you're doing blocking and you forget, the blocking can look a little bit off because you can see the colour from underneath, so you have to be sure that you keep putting it backwards and forwards to actually get the blocking as solid as possible. But it basically works, and I've gone, this is the flag I've started now. So what you'll see is when I go to the top parts of the flag, I start bringing in the actual image that was used from the original reference. Because this was not necessarily that hard, because it's obviously just a small section next to the guy's face. But when you get to the massive area that needs to be covered with the other parts of the flag, then it was just impossible to keep referencing it. So what I wanted to do is actually get some way of actually making the detailing as effective as possible, and that's the only way I could think of doing it. So I'll let you get on. I'll just let this run for a bit to show you. I'm probably going to finish this guy and then I'll jump into the flag. Another thing you'll notice is the detailing isn't that detailed, believe it or not, and this is all down to the fact that it's similar to how oil paintings work. If you go to a gallery, for instance, and you go close up, you can actually see the literal brush marks and everything, especially if it's done in impasto and everything. But some of the masters of the 16th century basically did strong brush strokes, but not in impasto style. And the thing is, if you step back far enough, let's say for instance you go 20 feet away from a large painting, some of the paintings like Velasquez did and things like that, what happens is your eye, because of the way the brain works, starts blending everything together, and it actually looks quite a detailed and smooth painting. And this is because the simple fact that you can trick the eye into believing that a couple of really strong, harsh brush strokes can actually, when next to each other, can actually come blended because of the persistence of vision of your brain. And I learnt this from actually when I went to the National Gallery and saw a Sickett painting on the wall, and he did this part of the painting which was a matchbox on a table, and it was just basically 3 palette knife movements, and when you looked at it close up, it actually did just look like 3 palette lines. But the thing is, if you stood way back, luckily in the portrait gallery, the National Portrait Gallery allowed you to step at least 20 feet back, it just looks so amazing as an actual realistic looking matchbox. And this is one of the things I learned when I went, and this is an important thing about going to the galleries and looking at other famous artists' work and how they look at it. And this is the nice thing when you can actually go up close to paintings in galleries, because you can actually see how their brush strokes work. And if you can replicate that same effect in digital painting, then you can have a nice style. And I think this is what I've tried to achieve here. This is not exactly the same as the original painting referencing, but I tried to get it as close as possible. But I wanted to give it, as I said before, this painterly look, and I think I've achieved it. Luckily, because of the way I've learned over the years, and also because of the way I've used the brush. Most people, when they're doing digital art, they think you have to have so much high-end detail so you can actually zoom into 1,000 times and it will look exactly clear, crystal clear, than when it was at 100% or even like 8%. Because if I zoom out of this, to see the whole picture, you'd have to sit at 8%. And that's not the case. You know, the case is digital art. It's just you painting on a computer. It's not you being ultra realistic with your artwork, even though some people do this, and it's to do with different tastes. So I would consider this digital art, even though it's got this kind of painterly feel, and that's the important part of it. So you find your own style, you find your own technique, and that's the most important part. Anyway, this guy's nearly finished, so I'll let him finish, and then he'll probably jump to the top of the flag. There we go. Right, so here we are at the top of the flag. This part was not that hard because it's just got to give this golden effect, but it's to do with how cleverly the original painter did the lighting and things, because it's got certain kind of lighting effects because of the way that the star is shining, and also the sun is trying to break through the clouds. As I said, I'm replicating something, so it's not as though I had to try to originate the actual lighting effect. But it works well, and as I said, this blocky effect with the painting is also a way to do it. This is the top of the blue section, and I did make a mistake during painting of this, and I had to finish it off after I basically finished this is it. I painted these stars, and I forgot to do the detailing on the stars. You'll notice that all the way through. And I kind of kicked myself when I finished the whole thing and displayed it in public, and then I realised I hadn't painted them, so I had to go back and repaint those with the shading and everything on them. But luckily the bluing of this was quite good. Now I started painting the main parts of the flag now, which is the white and red stripes. And just as historical fact, and there you go, and you see I've brought in the painting just so I can clarify the actual look and feel of this, because it was so complicated to do. But just a historical thing, the actual flag is an anomaly, because basically when George Washington went over the Delaware River, this flag didn't exist, because it actually shows the stars of the states, which they didn't have in that point in time. So it's actually been painted in after the event. He did probably have a flag with him, but it wasn't this one. And so this is the point, and the painter did it to be a representational thing of the actual heroic act, knowing that this was to show the independence of America. and it's trying to show it as it was then, which was, I don't know how many stars they had. It wasn't the actual standing of 53, or is it 52? They actually had something like maybe 13 or 20 or something, I'm not sure, but that was the one where it was in a circle. So this is the original flag of the States after the independence. Okay. As you can see, I can probably speed up this process a lot because I've got the actual picture next to me now rather than actually on a different screen, so I'm not looking constantly up. And the sampling helps a lot because I can dart backwards and forwards. When I'm doing my own projects as well, I'm using referencing of an animal or something, I tend to do this process as well, but I've slowly stopped doing it because it doesn't look nice on a speed render to see the actual picture that you're actually using after you start to speed rendering, because it looks like you're copying out or something. But referencing is an important part basically of doing artwork, because if you're doing a scene of an animal lying on a table, you're not going to be able to get an animal on the table, especially if you live in a small home like me, so you've got to try to find some referencing. And as long as you don't copy the picture exactly, or you use it as a build-up section of the actual picture you're doing, then I think it's a feasible way of actually going around the whole process of doing relatively nice looking artwork without the expense of hiring or taking photographs of the necessary reference images. And the internet today is full of so many images, especially on free sites and things like this, you could probably find. And even if you, for instance, got a figure you can find on a free site and it doesn't have the arm in the right place, you could always use tools in Photoshop, like Photoshop has a puppet warp, and you could just place certain things and twist the arm to the place you want it to. It may not look exactly in the good in the reference thing, but it's just a it's just a new way of actually getting it into the position you wanted to have it in. And then you could actually draw it the actual detail that you want it to, the more correct detail, sorry. So this is the flag I'm going through. The flags were actually done over 3 different days because it was so exhausting getting all these kind of very subtle crease marks that you see in the actual flag. So I decided to do it slowly but over a period of time. Each session would be maybe 2 to 4 hours possibly, and I'd go back to doing my actual work, or I'd do this at the end of the day after I've done my work, so it was a kind of a point where things were very tiring. But luckily you'll see that what I did first is a very intricate pencil sketch of the original, trying to mark out as many of the points that I needed to follow, like the lines of the stripes and some of the crease and fold lines on this flag, for instance. And it worked out really well. You know, I would recommend spending, if you've got enough time from the client, spending a few days, 1 day if it's a simple drawing, up to 3 or 4 days, which I've done in the past, of doing a pencil sketch to make sure you know how it's all going to work. And also, when you have a client, it's good to show the client the pencil sketch, because they can then correct things or ask you to change or add things before you actually start doing this whole process, and then realizing you've got to throw a load of stuff away and then start again. So pencil sketching is a very, very good way of taking away from the workload any possible complications. So move down the flag and we'll have it completed, but I did do a part where I got halfway across this section and I just literally gave up for, I think it was for over 2 months, and I came back to doing the last part of the flag. And luckily, you know, this is the thing you do over the years, you end up building a style, and you can't see the transition point where 2 months later, yeah, I think this is it. This is where I started doing it, because you can see I jump out to see an overall view and then I jump back in again. This is where I stop the speed rendering, and then I come back again, and then I know if I start again from the zoomed out thing, it going in, I know that it'll connect the same way. Anyway, but it's quite challenging but also rewarding when I got to this point, because I knew the flag would be finished. You'll notice how actually now that I've gone away from using the actual picture of the flag on the main painting as a reference, because I think over the time, this is actually starting in the second year, this is actually 2 years later. Over 2 years I've actually started finding ways to actually improve my observational skills and translating what I'm seeing from one reference picture on a different screen into the artwork on the other screen, and it works out quite well. It helps me speed up the process as well, so you'll notice that a lot of the stuff from now on is going to get a lot quicker than the original stuff I did in the first 3 or 4 characters. And it's because over the time in your practice you become better and better at it. So again, some of these things were quite easy to do, like these gun elements in the rear of the boat was quite a simple process, and it took me like maybe an hour, half an hour to do these, and so I could quickly then move on to the more important thing, which is doing a figure. Okay, so we're on to the last section of figures that I did in the second year. So this had been put away for over a year, literally over a year, and I'm not sure, I had a lot of commissions in the first part of 2022, and so as soon as that finished and I had a little bit of a lull, I was thinking, and I made a list on a spreadsheet of all the things that I've started that I hadn't finished, and this was one of them. And because it's so complicated, I thought I'd put this as the main thing I wanted to try and complete, and then if I can complete this quickly, I'd go through all the other projects I hadn't finished I started and finished, and most of these are private projects. So that's what I did, and I looked at this list and I thought I'd better get on with this. So everything from now on is basically me looking at this list and saying I've got to get this done. It's done, I think the last section was done over maybe a 2-week period. Also, when I'm doing this after 2 years, I've become much more happy and freer with the way I paint as well. So usually I do every single different thing on a different layer, whereas on here the lapels and the hair are on the same layer, so it enabled me to actually do the blending quite easy, and I'm just happier doing it that way. Again, he's finished nearly, just got to do some buckles. And then some more blocking in. For some some reason, I don't know why, when I was painting this and I was going through it, looking every time I look at the original, this person on the bottom left, you can see there, the white face. I'm convinced this is a female. I could historically look at the painting history and see if there is a reference of it being a female, but the long hair and just something about the face gives me the impression that it's a woman. Anyway, it gave me some really weird, daunting feelings about having to approach this. I don't know, it's because it's one of the biggest ones with area space, apart from Liberty. And while I'm talking about that, you'll notice, as I said, I was moving from the front of the boat to the back of the boat, and I completely miss out Liberty, even though it's blocked in. And it's because I wanted to do the replication of the original painting first, and that's why I don't do the earphones and the iPads and that. I'm just basically looking at the original painting. I was wanting to get to the point where, as if I thought everything was right with the original painting and it looks almost similar to the original painting, then I could then do the additional parts. I did do the speakers though, and I think the reason I did that is because they're just basically plain inanimate objects, which had surfaces which could be replicated quite easily. And I think I mentioned this before, and you'll see this when they start appearing. I actually use SketchUp quite a lot, whether to build my own models or find free models. And the good thing about SketchUp is, if you do find a free model or you make your own model, you can actually have it rotated and scaled to the size you want, and then just do a reference JPEG, so all the perspective's correct and all the lighting can be tested. Even though it's very basic lighting, it still gives you the shadow and highlight areas. And this is what I did with the speakers and the iPhones and iPads. Everything was basically done in 3D modeling in SketchUp, and then a render out was made so I could use as reference. This is another background figure. He has quite a lot of striping on his poncho, I think. I'm not sure he's supposed to be a Native American or Canadian American Indian of some sort, and he's wearing the ethnic coating, I'm not sure, but basically it gives me the impression that it's an ethnic figure because of the way that this poncho is resting on his shoulders. But you'll notice the guy on the end of the boat, he has this purse on his hip as well, and it has some kind of beading work on it, which also gives the impression of some ethnicity. But it's hard to understand from the look of the face and everything what ethnicity he is. Okay, and I'm getting the impression it's probably some kind of Canadian immigrant who's been living in that area for a while during the migration of different ethnicities over there, and he's probably taken up some of the Native American look and feel because of the blending into the environment and things like that. Not sure, but this is what I was thinking. There's one thing, interesting thing what I do when I'm painting is I'm looking at the characters and I'm trying to think of their history. Anyway, here we go onto the big main character, where I was a bit wary of doing because of the massive amounts of red, kind of this deep scarlet red. The dress, and it's another thing, it looks like a dress, so it's another reason I think it's a woman. The hair, the face, and the fact that it's a large area of clothing that looks like a dress. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just a guy with long hair. But anyway, I was painting it away, and I knew once I got this part done that I'm literally going down that downhill part of the process, and it's all kind of slowly going to come together. Saying that, there was points where I just thought, oh my god, I've still got this to do, and I really wanted to get it done within a week, and it didn't. It ended up being 2 weeks. But slowly, I'm doing blocking in again, and that's where I got another speaker finished. But I left it there, and for some reason I forget things as well, and I forgot to do the back of his hat. So once I'd done that, I moved on to this monstrous area of colour to fill in. Again, I always start with the face when after I've done the blocking in. If the face looks good, I can move on. If it doesn't look good, no, luckily I didn't have to redo hardly any of it. But then again, as I said before, I'm actually just literally translating what's on the original into a more stylized version that I've done, and trying to replicate it just as simple as possible and effective as possible. This was quite difficult to do the hair because it has these strands, even though I'm using a hairbrush. Looking at the reference image and trying to replicate all this highlighting and stranded hair is quite complicated, so it took me quite a while to do that, and you'll notice maybe the painting has slowed down a little bit. But yeah, got to be patient. As I said, this is 2 years of on and off, so you know, if you can't find a little bit of patience after 2 years of doing this, then you can't, or you shouldn't really finish it, you know, because the whole thing about art is patience. Developing a skill, but taking your time to develop that skill and not thinking you have to rush ahead to do it because you have to make money. You know, a good thing is worth waiting for. And all good artists, when they practice, they achieve things because, and they get used because of their skills that they've learnt and done over the years. So I would recommend, you know, doing these kind of projects when you haven't got a commission, because it allows you to develop things that you don't really have to worry about satisfying the client, which is another good thing. We can have a long conversation about clients, but I won't, because this is nothing to do with clients. So even though the clients dropped out of this one, I didn't have that much of an interaction with him. I've basically finished the background, and then he said, I don't want to do it the way you've suggested it, and so the client element left this project, and I can just use it as a self-development project. One thing I love about the painting, actually, the original and my copy is obviously because it's almost a duplicate of it, is this nice softened, muted kind of colours. You know, it's not bright reds, not bright blues, kind of darker hues, and it all comes together really nicely, and it gives you kind of a feeling of the period, which I really, really like. And obviously this is another thing I said, is that you can learn from this. And I'm thinking of doing some paintings for my own artwork, some ideas I have. Instead of using strong colours, I'm thinking of using these kind of muted, natural colours. And hopefully it'll work out and give a kind of a more moody feel, like a period mood. So we'll see. As I said, I've got some other projects I've got to get finished, because I don't really like having projects sitting around. You'll notice there's a bit just to the bottom right of the scarf on the cloak or whatever it is, that looks a little bit flat, and I think I'll come back to that later and actually try to add some detailing, because it looks awkward when everything else has this kind of nice texturing to it, and there's this big patch of not bright, but solid colour. And so I think I do come back to that a little bit. Yeah, you can see it next to the colour swatch thing. I just didn't like that massive red, dark red, so I think I'll come back to it. You see how simple these brush strokes are? There you go, told you. I added a little bit of something just to give it a kind of a stronger shadowing effect in certain parts. Right, this figure nearly done, because as I said, I was a bit worried about it. This is one of those purses I told you about. It has this kind of beading effect at the top of the purse, which gives the impression that it's an ethnic element to the whole painting. Let's do the oar and the hands, and this is this figure finished, and this is roughly after a week I've done this, just to try to get it all composed and finished. My main concern here was trying to get this all blended to the ground and the water level as well, because obviously it's wood and the water level is greeny colour, so that was kind of important to get that together, because obviously it's on two different layers, and so the blending was important to get right. Right, that's the trousers done. This is another thing about whether women in that period would be wearing trousers or not, or whether mercenary women would wear trousers. But if it's a man wearing trousers with a shawl over the top of it, then that gives the impression that's why it could be a man. This is where there's some kind of strange ambiguity in it all. But we could not worry about it too much. It could be a man, it could be a woman, so who cares as long as the painting looks good. That's another thing you notice when you're painting hands as well, that the pencil part looks terrible, but as soon as you start adding all this highlighting and shadowing, the hand actually then comes alive as a 3D form. It looks good, whereas the actual painting drawing to me doesn't look very good at all. So this is why you have to have a little bit of patience and stick with it. Right, here you go, there's final two characters, both got iPads. This is the only one actually, out of all of them, where I had to manipulate the actual shape of the hands a little bit more so it could actually hold the iPad that it's holding. I was getting quite happy and pleased at this point because I knew it was going to be finished soon, after 2 years of slogging away. Again, there you see the face doesn't look as good as it did in pencil, but as soon as you start adding all these little details and things, it all becomes more effective. You'll also notice that the hand colour is completely different to the face colour, and that's because the hand is probably catching a little bit of light from the sun coming through, whereas he's got shading from his hat going across his face. I think you will notice when you paint the hand, it will actually have a little bit of shadow, giving it the dimension it needs. Sorry for all the yawning through this, but being an artist, as I said, even doing a voiceover can become tiring, so watching me doing all this actually makes me feel tired, because I remember all the effort going into doing it, and I think I finished it, what's the date today, the 12th of July, I think I finished it on Sunday the 10th. And I was so over the moon. It's like, this joyous feeling, and you walk around after doing odd jobs around the house or going for walks in the city, and you have this kind of feeling of lightness because you've actually achieved the end goal, and you don't have to come back to this painting again to do it, and you just feel that there's a relief. So this is one thing I'm working towards here. I know that 2 or 3 days from this point, when I'm actually painting this part of the picture, it's going to be completed and I can feel happy again. This one was quite an easy guy to do because it's got quite a lot of similar tones like before, so it was literally just doing the shadowing and highlighting. One thing you will notice though is I do leave his hand, because I do that when I do the iPad, so I can actually do the blending together quite more effectively. that hand I told you about, and there's the shading, so it has a kind of relationship to the face, because basically there's lots of highlight on the hand because of the sun, and there's no highlight on the face, so that's why it's got such more muted highlights. At that point I finished it, and I did leave the hand like I said, and we're on to the final character now. I was so happy thinking this was going to be quite an easy thing to do, but then I realised I had to do some tassels on this purse thing or satchel, and that kind of gave me a kind of feeling of a little bit of dread, but I knew I was on the final last leg to get this done, so I was in a good mood and everything was working quite well. And you notice how fast I'm painting this differently. All the blocking in and the actual detailing became very quick. I actually did all the blocking in for this one, and then I decided to do the speaker, and this is where you'll notice where one of the front plates for the 3D model I did for in SketchUp appears, because I have to do the detailing on the front. I do a little Photoshop effect here to give it kind of a feeling of graininess. You'll see, and then once that's done, I paint the detailing based on the thing, but I lay the actual duplicates of the 3D model onto the actual painting as well, so I can actually know exactly where all the highlights and things are, because I wanted to get it looking as nice as possible. And that's quite quick. That's quite a quick process. I don't want to do it too accurately, because you'll notice at the bottom there's lots of writing and things as well where the control panel is. I'm just giving, and this is another thing I have to be aware of, is I'm trying to put quite a detailed object that I created into a painting that's got kind of this softness to it. And so if I did all the detailing of the lettering almost exactly as you see it in the 3D model, then it would look different to the way that the actual original painting does. So this has got to try to blend together to work with the actual original painting. So I try to constantly think while I'm painting the detailing to say, let's do it a little bit rougher so it actually fits into the feel of the main painting. And I think I achieved it. But most of these objects, because I've got such nice referencing from these 3D models, work quite quickly when you're painting. I don't think the lighting is exactly the same as when the painter did the original painting, but I was happy it was in north, and I tried to give the impression that the painting was coming from roughly the light, that was coming from roughly the same direction as the one in the painting, and that's why you got that shadow over that part of the tweeter. You see, there's more roughness to the lettering, and even the small lettering is just not as detailed as it would be. One thing about the referencing is, you know, these knobs, they stick out, whereas the ones on the actual references, and it's just got a flat reference painting on the actual 3D model of the original. So I had to make it look like it was a 3D knob instead of just this flat version that's distorted at an angle. Anyway, here we go, we're on to the last character. And I'm really happy at this point, thinking, oh, it's not going to be too long. It did take 2 days to do this guy, but some of the elements like this furring was the thing that took time, because you wanted to try to replicate it as much close as possible to the original, but also get it done. I think if you match them next to each other, there'd be lots of discrepancies, but if I did a shot of the original and a shot of the new one that I've done, one after the other, you'll think, oh, that's quite close. And you notice that's what made me happy about the whole thing. So here we go, this is the final face, which I needed to get right, and then we're going to move on to Liberty, which I'll talk about when we get there. This is the first face I did, which I actually had to adjust the eyes a little bit more than I would have in the first ones, because I'm not rushing it, but I was trying to get it done. And so I probably didn't put as much time and effort into the eyes as I did. So I noticed when I was referencing the original that the eyes looked a bit different, so I had to redo them, and you probably noticed that. Again, big massive area of the same colour. It did have some other colours coming into it. There was kind of a grey green, and then there's this orangey yellowy green you see there painting there. So it's important that you do this sampling, because if you sampled from the first part you do in the picture, it will all look the same and it won't be the same as the actual original. So this is one reason I have the original sitting there, and you'll notice I'm bouncing backwards and forwards doing the actual paint sampling. Okay, I believe this is where I started the next day, so this is the second day of this guy, and I was thinking this coat looks still enormous amount of area to cover, but I carried on. And this is another point I did. I have to try to finish areas. I didn't want that white hand to sit there while I was doing the rest of the coat, so I'm moving down the character. Sometimes you'll notice things flick off and you'll see the white underneath again, and that's simply because, for instance, his hair's black and you can't see where the line is, the pencil line, so I needed to figure out where it was, so I just turned the layer off quickly just to see where the line is and carry on painting. Okay, changed position because I thought, well, when you see me paint it, there's a lot of detail and toning in that last part of the coat, because of the creasing and everything, so I wanted to have a little break from it. So the trouser looked a lot less hard work than the actual coat, so I just had a quick break from it and did the trousers so I could get the feeling. And once I got that sorted out with the actual trousers, I was relieved because I knew I was going to get it done. Because I'm working on commissions at the same time whilst doing this, this was done at maybe from 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and so 5 o'clock till 7, say, or 7 or to 8, and that's the amount of time I said, and I wanted to achieve a certain point within that amount of time. And some things work a lot quicker than others, like the speaker only takes half an hour, the face only takes a little bit, but when you get some little minor details like these tassels on this purse holdall thing, then it creates a nightmare in your mind because your time scale just goes out the window. Here we go. Talk of the devil. So there's always little dots and there's always little lines going across, and there's these little tassels coming out of the back, and they're not exactly the same as the original because I couldn't get them exactly the same, but I wanted to get them flowing roughly the same, and that took quite a while to do because I wanted to make them as clear as possible. And then we'll go back to, you see this whole thing just then, instead of being the green, which is what the highlighting on the shadow of the right arm is, the rest of it is basically highlight. So you do the blocking in of the mid-tone, which is this dark green on the main body, but on the sleeve it's the light green. So this is why you notice I did that effect, is because most of the work on the actual right sleeve is just highlighting and doing the shading, whereas on the main body, because the main element is the shadow and the light work is just the highlighting of those points, then it was easier to do it that way. So I move across, and there's very little to do now. You'll notice I'm bringing more of this orangey, yellow, green in. There we have it. This is the guy finished after this little bit here, and I'll just jump onto the process of painting Liberty. I forgot he's got his hand in his oar, hasn't he? So that hand is very simple to do because it's not got any fingers that need any kind of realism doing it. It's actually the rear view of the palm, so that was quite easy to do, and so was the oar. So that's that guy finished, and that's the main element of the whole original picture finished. I left this to do last because of the nightmare of it, all these little beads and additional elements that needed to get filled in. I actually changed the look and feel of this because it's actually more bent over into the body. Because he's got an iPad into it, I needed to make it so it actually looks like it could hold an iPad, so that's changed. And so it gave me a little bit of liberty to do these tassels a bit. But once it was done, I was happy. And then we move on to all the additional parts, which is this Pioneer DJ player. Again, this took only maybe 15 minutes because I'm using this 3D model as a reference, and so there wasn't any complications in trying to evaluate how to do it. It was literally just copying it. But you do notice I actually put a block of grey over the sides because it's actually got the lighting from a different angle, and I wanted to make it look like it was actually more relevant to the actual scene, which is how it worked out in the end. So, and this is just lots of different twiddling around with different colours to make the lettering, the plug areas and all this kind of stuff. And it worked out well. It's just time consuming in that respect because you have to keep sampling all the different colours and doing very thin lines. Highlighting is important, and you'll notice I take off the reference picture to get the blending correct on that. Some of these models, they do the buttons in 3D, which is good on this point because it got this the right effect with the lighting and everything. But some of them they don't. They just literally just paste over the scan from the actual original artwork. I actually have done this logo on a different layer, you'll notice, and it's just in case sometime in the future they question having the logo on, and I can just literally switch the layer off and then export it out again. Which is something you need to consider, you know, and this is why I do so many different layers. Somewhere in the future you might have to change something, and if that's the case, you know, instead of painting over the whole object again, you can just paint over or delete or hide a layer, and that makes life a lot easier. So, getting quite close to the end now. This is quite nice because it had lots of colour, and there's not that much colour in the whole picture. So having some actual buttons with colour in was actually nice to paint. Okay, Liberty, that was my dread because I couldn't find a good picture of Liberty at that angle, so I had to try to find several different reference images. And this is how I painted it. I found one with this lighting in roughly the right direction. I don't know what you'll notice, it just doesn't look correct next to the rest of the picture, but I just faked it and hoped it would look the same. And I did do some changes. You'll notice later on when I do the raised arm, I changed the actual shading on the raised arm to be different from the actual reference picture because it just didn't look right for the scene that it was being placed in. Anyway, I was dreading doing Liberty, I don't know why, but when I started painting it all fell together and it actually was a lot easier to do than I thought. And giving all this hair detail and all this kind of stuff, I thought, oh my god, I'm going to have to literally do each grain of hair, and it wasn't the case. So basically I went through it quite well over a couple of days, and I ended up doing the final part, which is, you'll notice, well, I'll tell you when the final day appears, but you'll notice she's got this headset, and I wanted it to look like, even though it's a statue and it's solid, I wanted to make it look like it was a real person who was grey, and she was wearing a real pair of headphones, and so I made it look like the headphones went behind her hair, which you would naturally do, and that's why it looks like that. And then it's nice that the headphones actually then gave a break for the actual painting in some parts of the statue. One thing I did have to do is to think about how to do the shadowing on that though. So when I finished that part of the statue, I did an extra layer in multiply to give the effect of the statue and the shadow of the cord and the headphones going over the statue. These kind of quick lines I did for the sketch aren't following the statue exactly, it's just giving kind of an impression of them folding. And I noticed that somewhere down near the base I had to really be careful of how I added the highlights and everything. But it all worked out, and keeping this area here of the deep shadowing on her arm behind the tablet, I think is one of the things that actually allowed it to actually look like it fitted into the main painting, because it basically has that kind of depth of chiaroscuro effect of light and dark that the other character to the right of her holding the flag at the bottom has. So it kind of makes it feel like it's actually complementary. I was happy doing this part, and I was getting worried about their fingers, but as I said, I just followed the reference and realised that it's just basically shadow, highlight, and once you've done that, it looked like a 3D statue hand, basically. I found blocking in the shadowed areas helps me understand the way the process of doing the actual highlighting on the cloth, because it gives me a kind of a border, which is quite nice as well. So you'll see I do lots of this shadow stuff first before I do the highlighting, simply because it gives this kind of guide, as it were, and I can then patch in the bits that need to be just lighter tones or dirt tones, or whatever you want to call it, as well, which the original statue has, because it's been standing there for so long. And here we come. This is the end of day one on Liberty. This is the kind of Saturday I think I did this. Saturday the 9th. And I left this middle section of the lower skirt for some reason. I finished the bits to the left and the right, and then on the last day I started doing the final part of the skirt in the middle, and then that allows me to jump into the final day, which is just the top part of the statue, her arm, and then all the additional elements. So from this point, this is where I start. This is the last day now. I was eager to do it. I wanted a day off actually, and I didn't really want to get it done because I usually do a caricature on Sunday. But I was thinking, oh God, I just don't want to do this during the work week. So because I had Sunday and I was resting, not doing the caricature, I thought I'm going to get on with this and get it finished. I estimated it was going to be maybe 2 or 3 hours, and it took 3 hours. And that was nice because the statue part goes quite quickly. And you'll notice here when I get this little bit done, I do the shadow part. Blocking in again because I was a bit tired. Blocking in. And finish the statue and get it done. Yes, I've already done the shadow of the actual cord, but then I do the shadow of the actual headphones which makes it look kind of nicely 3D. And this is where I did the extra difference in the shading, because I wanted to make it look like the other arm, because I think that's how the lighting would have worked for that kind of light condition which we have. I did find that the actual dark part of the arm needed to be softened though, because it would have some reflective lighting. Get the old headphone set, which is finished, which is based on a reference picture, which is nice again because it makes it look like an actual set of headphones instead of just some kind of really rough blocking in of colour. So once that was done, microphone, which is an old 50s and 60s chromed one, which I found a reference for, which I was getting a bit dubious about at this point because it's time consuming doing this kind of detailing of the chrome, but as soon as I got those little black slits in on each section, the chroming was quite easy and quick, so I was really happy with the way it worked. And so what I do is I block in these ribbing parts, and as soon as you got the dark area in, the highlighting was quite simple to do, and it just made it look quite nicely chromed in a kind of vintage kind of look. It wasn't silver kind of aluminium kind of chrome look. It was like a moody kind of set in this kind of scene kind of chrome, which was nice. It worked out very well. As you can see, I finished it quicker than I thought I was going to do, because I was really scared that all these highlight points were going to be time consuming, but there you go. And then I got onto the last few parts, which was all the technology. Again, I was thinking, oh god, I'm going to have to paint all these app icons on the thing, and it actually went quite quickly. You'll see, because it was going to be done from this kind of perspective of it not being highly detailed, I did it, like I said, to blend in with the main painting. And that was a nice part of it, because it just didn't have to look realistic. So each one only took like maybe 15 minutes. 2 iPads and the rest are iPhones. Now there's one error. I didn't size the iPhone on the next guy I'm doing quite well. It actually looks like mammoth next to his hand and his head, but I wanted to get it done, so I just wanted to fill it in. So when I finish this iPad, you'll see that the next piece of technology I do is quite enormous. Maybe it's a new generation of iPhones that I've brought in advance, I don't know. This is the additional hand I said I was going to do. I based it on referencing from the original picture, but the fingers are all put out, and that was it. Okay, this is the iPhone that's a bit bigger than it should be, but as I said, I think I can get away with it. Maybe because it's kind of masked off quite a lot and you don't see a lot of it, it's just easy to kind of accept it, I think. Okay, so my buds. Again, that's to mask off the part where the phone goes into the pouch, and just quickly go through these icons. The only problem is all these icons are roughly the same on each phone, which is, I should probably change them, but I don't think anyone's going to look at these and say, oh god, look, all the icons are the same. Okay, you notice I start doing white and then I have to add some darker tone because this needs to be in shade. Okay, the last 2 iPhones. Doing some of these chords to give the impression that they've got microphones, headsets put into it. And we finally get to the last part, which was for me the most joyous bit, because I knew I was going to finish it within half an hour. So it's just these headphones and this headphone and the iPhone in the guy's pocket. And that was it. And then we're going to do the final phone and we'll be finished. So that's 27 days over 2 years. Quite an effective little outcome. I hope you enjoyed watching the way it was worked out rendering wise. Thank you for watching the video, and please consider subscribing to my channel, and also press the notification bell so you're aware of when a new video has been uploaded. If you like the video, consider pressing the thumbs up icon, as well as possibly leaving a comment to tell me what you think. Also consider sharing the video on these sites, as well as follow me on these social media channels. Thank you again for watching.